Okay, so what you just presented to this jury is absolutely absurd.
What do you want? I can breathe.
You utilized your dirty, hairy tactics and used excessive force to arrest him.
Corrupt cops have no place in our society. I mean, why would this cop plant drugs on an unsuspecting motorist or this police officer sexually molest a woman he was meant to help? The law enforcement code is supposed to be, first, do no harm, but unfortunately, these criminals didn't get the memo. And today, I will expose them. Here's a list of some of the cops that went absolutely crazy in the courtroom and were brought to justice. Todd Pate. Picture this, a packed courtroom in Kentucky, buzzing with tension. Todd Pate, once the sheriff of Breckinridge County, is at the center of it all, facing the fallout of his own reckless decisions. Judge Janet Crocker, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, presides over the hearing. The room is silent, save for the occasional murmur as everyone watches Pate, who seems a shadow of his former self. It all began with his arrest in March 2019 after a DUI crash that injured another driver. Pate, already under fire for a previous DUI in 2015, was now staring down 9 serious charges. These ranged from first-degree assault to leaving the scene of an accident. The courtroom wasn't just a place of law that day. It was a stage for the dramatic unraveling of a once-respected sheriff. The hearing didn't start well for Pate. As Judge Crocker noticed him fiddling with his phone, she wasted no time calling him out. Pate, sheepishly admitting it was, quickly tucked it away.
Is that your phone, Mr. Pate?
Yes, it is.
You need to put it away.
Okay. You
need to put it away.
Okay.
The exchange was brief, but set the tone. Judge Crocker wasn't in the mood for games. Pate was on thin ice. This was his second DUI while in office, and unlike the slap on the wrist he got in 2015, this time he wasn't getting off easy. His charges included first-degree assault, multiple counts of wanton endangerment, and criminal mischief. Initially, Pate was ready to accept a plea deal, 75 days in jail, with credit for time served. But when the time came to confirm his guilty plea, he hesitated.
I make somewhat of a statement.
That is a yes or no answer, sir.
This annoyed Judge Crocker. She pressed him, her voice full of irritation.
But if it is not your intent to enter a guilty plea at this time, then I'm going to set your case for jury trial, and you're going to stop wasting my time and everybody else's time this afternoon.
Ma'am, I'm not.
After a tense back and forth, Pate finally declared his intention to plead guilty. But he couldn't resist taking a swipe at the prosecution, suggesting the charges were harsher because of his position.
Let me just plea and get it over with for everybody. Plead to something that I absolutely do not feel good about, but I don't want you to try to send me to the penitentiary for years and years. If you can sleep with it, I can sleep with it.
This cop is showing absolutely no sympathy. With the plea finalized, Judge Crocker wasted no time saying,
"We're done at this point in time. We've got a fully executed plea document that provided in pertinent part that he was to serve 75 days in jail, and he's going into jail today."
So he was sentenced to 75 days in jail. However, thanks to time already served, he'd only need to spend 29 more days behind bars. Under a pre-trial diversion program, the charges would eventually be dismissed, but the damage to Pate's reputation was irreversible. Once a trusted figure in Breckinridge County, Pate's fall from grace was swift and public. His tenure as sheriff, which began in 2003, ended in disgrace. The new sheriff, Billy Richardson, vowed to rebuild the officer's reputation, but the damage had been done. Just like the damage to the reputation of the officer who stood by and let George Floyd die. Toe Thao. On a quiet Monday in Minneapolis, Toe Thao, a former police officer, faced his sentencing for his role in George Floyd's tragic death. Convicted of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter, he was handed 4 years and 9 months behind bars. But even with the verdict sealed, Thao refused to back down, insisting he had done nothing wrong. On that fateful day, May 25, 2020, Thao stood on the sidelines, keeping bystanders at bay, as Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck for over 9 agonizing minutes. Floyd's fading cries of "I can't breathe" were immortalized in a bystander's video, shocking the world and sparking a movement against police brutality. Thao defended his actions, claiming he was merely a human traffic cone, ensuring the scene stayed secure while Chauvin and the other officers did their work. To him, there was no crime in that. At the sentencing, Thao had a lot to say, 20 minutes to be exact, He spoke about rediscovering his Christian faith during the 340 days he had already spent in jail. While expressing regret over Floyd's death, he still refused to take responsibility for it.
To the truth, I did not commit these crimes. My conscience is clear.
Thao wasn't just unremorseful, he was defensive. He declared he would not betray his beliefs, likening his situation to biblical martyrdom, saying he wouldn't be a Judas to save himself. And in a moment that left the courtroom stunned, he told the judge that he and his wife had prayed for him.
I have prayed for everyone here. Judge, I've prayed for you. Me and my wife has prayed for you.
But Judge Peter Cahill wasn't impressed. In fact, he seemed downright annoyed.
After 3 years of reflection, I was hoping for a little more remorse, regret, acknowledgement of some responsibility, and less preaching.
He wasn't buying Thao's act of piety, and his sentence made that clear. Cahill handed down 57 months, a punishment even longer than what prosecutors had asked for. Cahill made it a point to emphasize Thao's unique role in Floyd's death. He wasn't as culpable as Chauvin, who actively took Floyd's life, but he wasn't innocent either.
Suffice it to say that I think your culpability is less than Mr. Chauvin, but well above Mr. King and Mr. Lane. As an experienced senior officer who was in the best position to save George Floyd.
Thao's lawyer, Robert Paul, announced they'd appeal the sentence but didn't have much else to say. In court, Paul called Thao a good, decent man.
My client is a good and decent man with a family, just as all of us in this courtroom are. I would ask the court to sentence my client to a term of 41 months in prison, which is the low end of the guidelines range, and give him credit for the 340 days that he has already served in this matter.
But Assistant Attorney General Erin Eldridge wasn't having it. She reminded the court of the impact of Floyd's death, both in the US and the world. Floyd had narrated his own death, she said, as he begged for help that never came. She condemned Thao for standing by, preventing anyone, including a trained EMT, from helping Floyd. Floyd's family wasn't present for the sentencing. After 3 years of public grieving, they opted to mourn privately. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison respected their choice, but made it clear the sentence was about accountability. After Floyd's death, protests broke out around the world, leading to big discussions about race and policing. But as Thao heads to prison, people still wonder, why didn't he step in? Why didn't he stop Chauvin? Instead of admitting guilt or taking a plea deal like the other officers, Thao took his chances with a trial that used evidence from Chauvin's case. In the end, it didn't work out for him. Thao's sentence will run alongside a separate federal sentence for civil rights violations, meaning he'll serve time for both crimes together. But the takeaway from his case is clear. Standing by in the face of injustice is just as terrible as taking part in it. And for that, Thao will pay the price, as will this corrupt cop, Eric Fritz.
You betrayed her, you betrayed your fellow officers, you betrayed them mightily, the public trust all of us had.
Back in July 2016, a regular night in Covert Township, Michigan, turned into an absolute nightmare because of one cop, Eric Fritz. This guy was fresh on the job, supposedly out there to protect and serve. Instead, he pulled over a driver for drunk driving, took the guy in, and then completely abused his power when it came to the passenger, Melissa McMillan. And when I say abused his power, I mean it was horrifying. Melissa was drunk, like barely standing up drunk, after a night out at the bar. She didn't even know what was going on half the time, and instead of doing his job, making sure she got somewhere safe, Fritz decided to take her to a hotel room. Yup, a hotel room. But it gets worse. Prosecutors said he didn't stop there. He took her to a second hotel that same night and allegedly raped her 3 times. 3 times. Melissa's memory of that night was fuzzy, but the stuff she did remember.
Tell me what your first recall is after leaving Captain Luce.
It's so hard to remember because everything is so blurry.
It's the kind of thing that makes your stomach turn. She talked about waking up, confused, and there he was, on top of her, doing things she didn't consent to. Before that, she remembered him ordering her to take a shower while she was still super out of it. And if that wasn't disgusting enough, she threw up in front of him, and instead of helping her, he took naked pictures of her without her consent. I mean, how much worse can it get? But it does. Fritz made sure to turn off his patrol car's camera right after the traffic stop, like he knew he was about to do something shady. That move alone screams guilt. The next morning, Melissa, still reeling from what happened, went to the hospital after her ex-boyfriend convinced her to. She went through a sexual assault exam, and that was the start of her long, painful journey to get justice. By 2018, she'd filed a federal lawsuit against Fritz, calling him out for harassment, assault, and all kinds of civil rights violations. Now, here's where it gets infuriating. Fritz was hit with some heavy charges, first-degree criminal sexual conduct and kidnapping, but somehow, in 2017, he got a plea deal. He pleaded no contest to unlawful imprisonment, which is a fancy way of saying they dropped the serious charges. His punishment? 1 year in jail and 5 years on probation. That's it. 1 year. For what he did. At his sentencing, Fritz gave this weak apology, acting like the worst thing he did was take Melissa to a hotel. He completely sidestepped the assaults.
I'd like to apologize to my friends and family who I've actually let down. I'd also like to apologize for my coworkers who I embarrassed by my decisions. And I absolutely would like to apologize for Mr. Milne for my horrific decision of offering her a hotel room.
But Judge Kathleen M. Brickley, she let him have it. She straight up told him he'd abused his badge and betrayed everyone, Melissa, his fellow officers, and the whole community. Melissa spoke too, and wow, it was powerful.
What you did to me was wrong. You hit me. You knew I was highly intoxicated, yet you used that as a selfish opportunity. My life has been forever changed. Every aspect of my life has been affected.
Melissa eventually settled a civil lawsuit for $105,000, which was paid by the township and their insurance. But even then, the township acted like they'd done nothing wrong. They claimed no amount of training could have stopped Fritz from being the monster he was that night. And his lawyer even argued that Fritz thought everything was consensual. Anyway, Fritz quit the force within 2 weeks of all this coming out, which was probably the only good decision he made. But let's be real, the damage was already done. Melissa's life was torn apart, and the trust between the community and the police completely shattered. Before wrapping up, Judge Brickley delivered one last punch. She said,
You took a law enforcement oath of honor to protect and to serve and to uphold the highest of ethical standards. Instead, you preyed upon and exploited and damaged a woman who was entirely helpless due to excessive intoxication.
Stories like this just show how devastating it is when someone in power turns into the very thing they're supposed to protect people from. Fritz didn't just ruin lives, he wrecked trust, and that's a wound that takes forever to heal. Now, let me tell you about the former Inkster cop who probably thought he could get away with anything, but oh boy, was he wrong. William Melendez. His name became infamous after a brutal incident that happened during what should have been a routine traffic stop. It was the kind of thing you hear about and just can't wrap your head around. Here's what went down. Melendez pulled over Floyd Dent, a black motorist, and instead of handling it like a professional, he straight up attacked the guy. And I'm not exaggerating, he punched Dent 16 times in the head. 16. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the whole thing was caught on the police dash cam. So there was no he said, she said. It was all there. Clear as day. Now the whole stop started because Dent didn't pull over right away. He later said he wasn't sure the cops were stopping him at first. When he finally did stop, Dent got out of his car with his hands up, but the police claimed he was shouting, "I'll kill you," and resisting arrest. Dent denied all of that. Instead, he said he was fighting to breathe because one of the officers had him in a chokehold. And get this. After the whole mess, they tried to pin a drug charge on him. They said they found crack cocaine in his car. But here's the twist. Dent passed a lie detector test, and his fingerprints weren't on the bag. Eventually, those charges were dropped, and Dent sued the city. He ended up with a $1.4 million settlement, which honestly doesn't even begin to cover what he went through. So, Melendez didn't just walk away from this. He was arrested and hit with a list of charges, including misconduct in office, assault with intent to do great bodily harm, and assault by strangulation. The courtroom during his trial, pure tension. And Melendez, he didn't even bother testifying, probably because he knew there was no talking his way out of what was on that dash cam. Now here's where Judge Vonda Evans comes in, and she did not hold back. Before sentencing, she gave Melendez the chance to speak, and he did. He apologized and tried to show some remorse, but Judge Evans wasn't buying it. She called him out for his dirty Harry tactics, and how he betrayed not just Floyd Dent, but his city and even his own family.
Utilize your dirty, hairy tactics and use excessive force to arrest him. You betrayed your city. You caused your lovely wife heartache. And you caused Mr. Dent severe anguish.
When it came time to sentence him, Judge Evans dropped the hammer, 13 months to 10 years in prison. And Melendez? He barely showed any emotion as the reality of his new life set in. Even now, he's planning to appeal the conviction, hoping for a lighter sentence. Now, let me tell you about a former Jackson County deputy who seriously messed up, planting drugs on people and arresting them.
That is not mine. No, sir.
Zachary Webster. Zachary Webster thought he could use his badge to play judge, jury, and executioner, but when it all came crashing down, the story was nothing short of jaw-dropping. So here's the deal. Webster ended up facing a ridiculous 67 charges. Yeah, you heard that right. 67. We're talking about serious stuff like racketeering, official misconduct, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, drug possession, and even perjury. Basically, this man was a walking example of everything a cop shouldn't be. And it wasn't just paperwork-level corruption either. Webster's crimes were horrifyingly hands-on. Back in 2017 and 2018, he was accused of planting meth and drug paraphernalia during traffic stops. Imagine just driving along, minding your business, and the next thing you know, you're being hauled off to jail for drugs you didn't even have. That's exactly what he did to innocent people, over and over again. One of the most heart-wrenching stories came from Teresa Odom, one of Webster's victims. She stood in court, choking back tears, talking about how this wrongful arrest turned her life upside down. She said she lost her credibility as a mom and grandma, and honestly, that's just one story. There were so many others like her, people who lost their freedom, their reputations, and their peace of mind because Webster thought he could get away with planting evidence. When it came time for Webster to face the music, the courtroom was packed with tension. Prosecutor Tom Williams didn't hold back, calling for a 15-year sentence. He pointed out how Webster's lies had led to innocent people being wrongfully convicted in the very same courthouse where he was now being tried. Williams made it clear, with great power comes great responsibility, and Webster had failed miserably. But Webster's defense team tried to pull at the court's heartstrings. They brought in character witnesses, including his wife, Rebecca, who painted him as a loving, compassionate man who made a mistake. The mistake in question was planting drugs on people multiple times. In the end, Circuit Judge James Goodman wasn't swayed by the emotional pleas. He recognized the massive damage Webster's actions had caused and handed down a sentence of 12 years and 6 months. It wasn't the full 15 years the prosecution wanted, but it was enough to send a message: abuse your badge and you'll pay the price. As the sentence was read, Webster sat there in tears, hiding behind his mask. The courtroom was a mix of emotions, some people relieved that justice had finally been served, others heartbroken over the lives he had wrecked, and finally, Brady Lovingier versus Anthony Waller. This story takes us to Denver, Colorado, where Anthony Waller's fight for justice collided with a shocking abuse of power. Waller had been arrested on charges of false imprisonment, first-degree assault, a misdemeanor, and possession of drug paraphernalia. Nothing extraordinary about that, right? He was in court for a basic advisement hearing, trying to make sense of the charges against him. But then things took a jaw-dropping turn. As Waller calmly addressed the judge, seeking clarification, Deputy Brady Lovingier, the guy who was supposed to keep the peace, lost it. Out of nowhere, Lovingier grabbed Waller, while he was handcuffed, mind you, and slammed his head into a metal window frame. The force left Waller with a nasty head gash and a fractured orbital bone. And here's the wild part. This all happened in front of a judge, court staff, and a room full of spectators. People were stunned, gasping in disbelief as this scene of blatant brutality unfolded right in front of them.
Get on your feet. Don't turn on me.
The judge didn't hesitate to act. She filed a grievance against Lovingier for excessive force, causing an internal investigation. But for Waller, the damage was done, both physically and emotionally. What was supposed to be a routine court appearance turned into a nightmare. Waller wasn't about to let this slide, though. He took Lovingier and the city of Denver to court, filing a civil lawsuit to hold them accountable. After a grueling legal battle, Waller scored a win. A jury found Lovingier liable for using excessive force, awarding Waller $50,000 in damages. On top of that, the court tacked on $176,226 to cover his legal fees. But as with most stories like this, there was a bittersweet twist. Despite winning his lawsuit, Waller wasn't exactly walking away scot-free. He was convicted of third-degree first-degree assault and sentenced to 2 years in county jail. The guy who got his head slammed into a window walked out of the courtroom with a prison sentence. It's the kind of irony that makes you shake your head. As for Lovingier, he got a 30-day suspension after a year-long investigation, which feels like a slap on the wrist, considering what he did. By 2016, he was out of the sheriff's department altogether. There were even accusations of nepotism. Waller claimed Lovingier only got the job because his dad used to run the Denver Sheriff's Department, but the courts didn't find enough evidence to back that up. In the end, Anthony Waller's case is one of those stories that leaves you with a mix of emotions: anger, disbelief, maybe even a little hope that anyone can get justice, even a criminal. Thanks for watching. Click the screen for more exciting court content.